say God's way only. Just run away with the wrong way. Yeah.
No way, no, no,
No way.
no way, no, no,
No way.
leave that.
I am gonna say God's way only. You just run away with your own way. Wealth is all you see. You don't care for people like me. Can't spend all the wealth you own. What did you do to help the poor? What's this you want me to do? No, I can't be like you. Can't alone must stand this way. Well, you gotta go do it yourself.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another lesson in the series, The Special Resurrection, an in-depth study. As we normally start by saying, safely through another week, God has brought us on our way. Let us now a blessing seek, waiting in His courts today. Day of all, the week the best, and emblem of eternal rest. Thank you all for joining, and it's a pleasure meeting with you here another Sabbath evening. Now, first I want to thank God for His goodness and for His mercies, because we know that we should never take it for granted the fact that we're alive, because there are many people who were here last Sabbath, and they are not here today. And sometimes for various reasons, sickness, some tragic, some as a result of crime and violence, domestic abuse, whatever it is. So we should never reach a point in our life that we take for granted the fact that we are alive. The fact that we're alive is that proof that God is indeed sitting on on the throne, and that He's still merciful. So we just want to give Him thanks for that. So before we go on any further, let's just pause for a minute to give God thanks for His goodness and for His mercies, and also for His Son Jesus Christ that He sent to die for us. Let us pray. Father in heaven, we truly thank You for this wonderful privilege that You have granted unto us. Father, we know that it's not anything that we have done why our life has been spared, why we are still in the right frame of mind, but it's because of Your goodness, it's because of Your mercies. So we thank You in a special way. As we are about to open up Your word once more, dear Father, we're asking for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding through Your Holy Spirit. Open up our minds, dear Father, we beg, far much more than we can ask. And may at the end of the presentation we can say, it was good to be here. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Yeah, so we're continuing the study of the special resurrection. And I just want to start tonight by doing a quick recap of how we got here. Now, about 3 years ago, that would have been 2016 or probably 2015. I was in church one Sabbath in West Palm Beach when the preacher made reference to the phrase or terminology, special resurrection. Now, that was the first time that I was hearing those words, or that event. And I started searching the Bible, searching the spirit of prophecy, because my main books were The Great Controversy, The Desire of Ages, and The Patriarchs and Prophets. And those were my main go-to books, even though I had the E.G. White app installed on the phone, but those were my main go-to books. And I was looking for the word special resurrection, and I couldn't find it. And I was a little uneasy because I started to remember the text Revelation 1 and verse 7. Behold, he cometh with clouds, and all eyes shall see him. So all of a sudden, that text started to give me a problem. I started realizing that, hey, you do not understand this text. So before, I didn't have a problem with the text because, it was just a normal text. Behold, he cometh with clouds, and all eyes shall see him, and even those who pierced him. But I was never looking at even those who pierced him. So even though the preacher did make reference to, anyone who are going to be in the special resurrection, when he said that there's going to be a special resurrection, that text, started, to bother me, and I was wrestling with it for a while. And then a friend called me one Sabbath afternoon, one Sabbath just after sunset, and she was asking, how many resurrections are you aware of in the last days? And I'm saying, I know of 2, but a few weeks ago, I heard of another. And as a result, I'm struggling with a particular text, but I don't know where to go with it. And we started searching, and we found an article, a PDF document, not having much, but it started to lead, making reference of Revelation 1 and verse 7. But the writer was not clear, on it. But from what he was saying, we were concluding that there's something about this text. Because from what the Bible teaches, that when Christ comes the third time, the wicked dead is going to be raised. So how are they going to be seeing him when he comes the second time? But we couldn't find any text to support it. Then about almost a year after, I saw a presentation from an evangelist, Carlton Knott. And he did, for me, it was a comprehensive, study on the subject for me, because when he presented it, I saw that yes, there is indeed, the Bible is talking about. The Bible is indeed referring to a resurrection that must happen before Christ comes. So I started to prepare my slides, and started sharing it with some brethren, but most of the brethren, were not so welcoming to a doctrine or believe that there's going to be a third resurrection. Some of the brethren were outrightly saying, no, do not bring that, that type of teaching to me. The Bible speaks of 2 resurrection, 1 and 2, and that's it. So I was reluctant to speak about it, even though I know that it is truth, right? But I was unwilling to speak, and I was praying, and I said, Father, give me a sign, because I know it is truth, and there's nothing that I can do or anyone can do to stop it. People must know about the resurrection, the special resurrection, especially Seventh-day Adventists. All right. So I was praying, and I was asking God for a sign. Just give me a sign, and whenever I get that sign, I don't know what the sign was, but I said, just give me a sign, and whenever the sign comes, I will be willing to take take it to other people. So that continued for about a year and a half or so, until this year in 2019, the first quarter, the book of Revelation, where on Thursday, January 3rd, that is titled The Keynote of Revelation, the author of the lesson made reference to that same text that has been giving me a problem. And he made mention of the same thing, and I believe that this was the sign that God has given me. Because now I realize that I am not the one or just the 2 who believe that there is indeed a special resurrection. There are the members of the church who have seen the light. So, I felt like, it was time for me to start, to sharing it to anyone who, who was willing to listen to what I had to say. And the lesson says, like the rest of the New Testament. So anyone who has the first quarter lesson of 2019, if you haven't thrown it away, I have my copy in my bag. So just to walk around, just in case I'm invited to a church to present it, I can say, it was in the lesson. And we studied this lesson and we commented, and this lesson was reviewed on Sabbath morning, and we commented on it. It is in the lesson. We read it. Where it points to a literal, visible, and personal coming of Christ in majesty and glory. And then the author says, every human being alive. And the key word here is being alive. So even though the Bible says every eyes shall see him, the every eyes that shall see him are those who are alive. I will say much more about that when I look at the key text. Right? So the every eye that shall see him are referring to those who are alive, not those who are dead. Because if you're dead, you cannot see Christ. And we'll look at texts that support that argument in a few minutes, right? So even those who pierced him are going to see him as well. And then he went on to say that these words point to a special resurrection of certain people right before the return of Christ. Including, that is the word, including, so they're not the only one, so including those who crucified him. So the author of the lesson is saying that there is going to be a special resurrection before Jesus Christ comes, and including those who will be alive to see him, or including those who will be resurrected, are those who crucified him. It's in the lesson. So when I saw this, I took that to be the sign that I was asking for. So I went ahead and I prepared, put my things together, and I created, I created it in 5 lessons. Lesson 1, I look at foundation laid. Foundation laid has to do with what we believe as Seventh-day Adventists. What our doctrine should be built on. The greater light, the Bible, and the lesser light, the spirit of prophecy, are the ministry of Ellen G. White, right? And that's not anything questionable. Any light we have, any doctrine we have, must be built on the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. The greater light and the lesser light. And if you haven't seen that presentation, I encourage you to look on our channel, or you can go to our YouTube, the Advent Bad Ministry, and you can search for that playlist, because we have all the videos in a playlist. In lesson 2 and 3, we look at the first and second resurrection, resurrection 1 and resurrection 2. We saw that one happens after Christ comes, that resurrection 1 for the righteous only, and then resurrection 2 happens 1,000 years after the first one. So none of the 2 resurrection, general resurrection, happens before Christ comes. Both happens. One happens after he comes the second time, and then the second resurrection will happen after he comes the third time. All right. Now, last week we looked at God's chosen people, and it is important that we look at God's chosen people, because including those who will be resurrected are going to be God's chosen people. So we have those who pierced him and God's chosen people, and we are going to find the scripture that supports that, and also the testimony of Ellen White that supports that, right? So we saw that, as a church, we are special. We are saints, according to Revelation chapter 14 and verse 12, 1 Peter 2 and verse 9, we are royalty, holy nation, a peculiar people, unique people, right? We have a special message, Matthew 24, that this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached to all the world. And in Revelation chapter 14, verse 6, I think that should be 6 to 12, we have the 3 angels' messages, and also the 4th angel of Revelation chapter 18, verses 1 to 5. So we have a special message. We have a special work. The special work, Revelation chapter 4 and verse 16 and Matthew 24, 14, is to take that special message to every kindred, tongue, and people. That is a word that is given to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, right? And we know that we are hated by Satan, because all that live godly shall suffer persecution. The Bible also tells us that the devil was what? Wrath with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant, that this church, right? We also have special attack that we suffer. Many of us, aren't able to get a job, or a good job, or the job that we want, because, we are required to work on Sabbath, and that job is not, a job where is relating to human humanity, giving service, a type of service to helping those who are vulnerable, who are unable to help themselves. Some of us, people talk, will say, I wasn't able to attend my graduation. I was able to do this project because, the instructor was adamant that I had to give up something. I have to give up even one Sabbath in order to do this, and I was unwilling to do that. So we have many attacks that we suffer. And those who die, everyone who die, their death will be seen as special. Revelation chapter 14 and verse 13 tells us that, blessed are the dead that die in the Lord from henceforth. So those who die from henceforth are that their death is seen as a blessed death. Look at that in detail shortly, right? And anyone who die henceforth will be blessed with a special resurrection. And that is taken from Revelation chapter 14 and verse 13, and Daniel 12 and verse 2. So we're going to get into the meat of the matter now. Now, Revelation, the lesson of the resurrection, of this lesson, resurrection 3, is going to be in two parts. You have 5.1, and the next Sabbath we'll look at 5.2. Why? Because there are so many slides in this presentation, because I wanted it to be so clear. I want it to be clear that I can understand, and then I can share it with others, so they can understand from how I understood it. So as a result, there are many slides, like over 100 slides in lesson 5 alone. So I had to break it into two parts, 5.1 and 5.2. So next week we'll look at 5.2, right? So let me start now by saying that the belief of a special resurrection can be a hard pill to swallow. And that's no joke. Especially for Seventh-day Adventists, who have grown up studying the Bible, and we have been taught that we should, be careful of, dancing to every music of doctrine that we hear. Right? And most Seventh-day Adventists, their key text is to the law and to the testimony. Growing up, and those who grew up in my era, Mount James Church, they can tell you that, thanks to J.D. Joshua Berry, that one of the texts that we knew as kids growing, even before we knew John, that was the one that says Jesus wept, John 11:35, I think it is. Even before we knew that, we all had to know Isaiah 8 and verse 20, to the law and to the testimony. If they speak not according to what the Bible says, it's because the message has no light. So the Bible teaches that there are two general resurrections, the first and the second. So for someone to come now and start saying that there is a third resurrection, then the average Seventh-day Adventist is going to, it's going to say, oh, hey, hold on. You hold on a little, not so fast. Let me check out what you're saying. So that's, that's understood. But what we should never do, we should never use the idea or the belief that we have that we should always protect the truth that we have, to use that belief to block new light. Okay? Never do that, because God is always revealing things to us. And the new light that we get should not be the light that is contradicting the old light. It should be magnifying the old light. New light magnifies old light, right? Does not contradicts it. Never contradicts it. Because it is God who reveals, and God cannot contradict himself, right? The Holy Spirit cannot contradict himself. Now, bear in mind that we will not see the words special resurrection in the Bible. We will not see that in the King James Version of the Bible. Never. And probably in no Bible commentary will we see the word special resurrection mentioned. But the Bible does speak of, another resurrection that is different from the first and the second resurrection. That's what we're looking at tonight. So even though the word special resurrections are not in the Bible, we should not say, I don't want to hear about it because the word special resurrection is not in the Bible. But then what about the words like Sunday law, communion, Trinity, the papacy, Roman Catholic Church, USA in Revelation chapter 13. So there are many names that we use, but even though those names are not actually in the Bible, but the Bible does allude to America being the lamb-like beast. The Bible does allude to a Sunday law that will be enacted through the influence of the Protestant churches in America. The Bible does speaks that the Roman Catholic, the papacy, is the falling church. The Bible does say these things, but so even though the words are not in the Bible, if we say there's going to be a national Sunday law, we're not saying something that's not in the Bible, all right? So our key text is, behold, he cometh with clouds, and all eyes shall see him, and they also which pierced him. And we, from looking at this text, we know that this is talking about the first resurrection, not the first resurrection, but the second coming, the second advent of Christ, all right? Yes. So this is talking of the second advent of Christ, not a resurrection. It's talking about the second advent of Christ. And we learned that when we look at lesson 2, where we look at the resurrection 1, where we saw the clouds and Christ coming, the clouds and all of that, and we realized, that the clouds is not literal clouds. So if you haven't seen that presentation, I invite you to go and look at it. So the clouds here is not the literal clouds that we see in the sky. It is referring to the angelic host, because there are so many. John and Daniel say that there were 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands. It's just like saying that it's just too much. Just imagine you go somewhere to a public event, and when you return, someone asks, how many people were there with you? Or and you say millions, because it was impossible for you to number everyone was there. So that was so because there are so many angels, the prophet refers to them as 10,000 times 10,000 times thousands of thousands. That's a lot. That's like an infinite number. Thousands of thousands, and of mean times. So 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands times thousands. That's a lot. That's a lot. A lot of angels. So that's why it is referred to as the cloud of angels. And it's saying that those who will see Christ, those who will be alive to see Christ when he comes the second time, are those who pierced him. And we know that those who pierced him, the soldier who killed him at least, right, who pushed the thing in his side, those who drove the nail in his hand, those who crucified him, they are all dead. The Bible teaches in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 5 to 6 that what? For the living know that they shall die, but the dead have nothing more to do with anything under the sun until they are resurrected. Nothing. They are not around the throne of God. They are not in purgatory. They are not in hell. They are not in the sky watching over us. They are in the grave, just like David, both dead and buried in the grave until Christ resurrects them. So in order for them to see Christ coming, they would have to be raised by God before he comes. So if those who kill Jesus will see him when he is coming the second time, which resurrection will they be a part of? Is it the first? Or is it the second? If they are going to see, because we know from looking at this text that those who pierced Christ, those who crucified him, will see him when he's coming. So the question that is asked then, is which resurrection they are going to be in. We know by default that they will also be in the second resurrection. Right? We know that by default. When we look at lesson 3, we look at that. We know that they are going to be in the second resurrection. But the second resurrection takes place 1,000 years after the first one. You see what I'm saying? So, which resurrection is it then? Is it the first one? But remember that the first one takes place after Jesus comes. because Christ will come in the clouds, and then when he comes, or after he comes, he's going to raise those who are alive. Sorry, raise those who are dead, and then those who are alive, will caught up with him. Yeah, those who are alive cannot be raised. Right? So those who are alive will be caught up with him after those who are dead, were raised. Everyone who is alive will see him. Now, so the question I ask, which resurrection it would be, and some might say, I don't know. I'm not sure what the Bible is saying. But look at what Paul is saying. Paul is saying, brethren, I would not want you to be ignorant concerning those who are dead. As Seventh-day Adventists, right? Paul is saying to us today that God does not want us to be ignorant concerning the dead. We, the remnant church, we God's chosen people, must know from the word of God what are the things that will happen to those who are who have died. Because what was happening was that, if you can remember, that the early church, having been poured out with the Holy Spirit, they believed, because remember, I think there was in Joel where it says that in the last days, the visions and this dream. So that was happening shortly after, from the day of Pentecost. And they thought that Christ was going to return in their lifetime. But then people started getting old, people started dying from old age, and the brethren were asked, started asking questions. How was it that Christ is supposed to come and we are dying? And he was telling them too that we shall not all sleep too. Not all of us are going to die. Even though, because Paul would have thought he would have probably Christ would have come in his lifetime too. But the fact of the matter here is that God does not want us to be ignorant concerning those who are dead. So Paul addressed it, and he says, okay, we shall not all sleep. Some of us are going to change. Christ is going to come back. When he comes back, in the twinkling of an eye, right, he's going to call those who are asleep with the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, and the dead in Christ shall rise first, and then we, whatever alive and remain, shall be caught up. So Paul addressed it, and if Paul was here today preaching, he would have also addressed the issue of the special resurrection, because God doesn't want us to live in ignorance. Right, listen what Ellen White says. She says the book, I'm not sure if I have that slide, but she says God does not only want us to know what happened in yesteryear by reading the Bible, or what is happening today, but because God knows the future, and we being in the image of God, he wants us to know the future too. And we can only know the future by him revealing it to us. All right? So she says the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, that they are one book. One is a prophecy, one is a revelation. One is a sealed book and the other an open book. Now, you write in the book of Daniel, the book called Daniel and the Revelation, written by Uriah Smith. And we know that Uriah Smith writing is not inspired. We know that. Ellen White is writing is inspired, but he's not. But the pioneers, their work should not be taken lightly, because these men, even though they are prone to make mistakes from what they wrote, are coming to the wrong conclusion. But these were the men who studied the Bible to arrive at their conclusions. Ellen White was given visions from God. So we should never, make it seem as if the pioneers, the writers of the pioneers, their writing is irrelevant. It is relevant as long as what they are saying is not contradicting what the Bible teaches, or if new light does not contradict what they were saying before. All right. So we know that Uriah Smith is not inspired, but what he's saying here is corroborating what Ellen White says. So that's why I'm using it. All right. So I don't see a problem, with referencing a pioneer if what he's saying does not contradict what the Bible says. All right. So I know that there's some people who might have, say, but U.R. Smith was not inspired. That is true. We know that he was not inspired. But what he's saying here is that Daniel and Revelation, they should be studied side by side. They are counterparts. They are one book. So when you're studying Daniel, you must also be studying Revelation. Studying Revelation, you must be studying Daniel. So, and today, we'll be studying both books in order to get an understanding of the special resurrection. Now, we start at Daniel 1 and verse 2. And it says, and at that time shall Michael stand up. So we've seen some words here. Michael standing up. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was. There was a time. And everyone whose name is written in the book, all right, shall be delivered. Now, we're seeing the word Michael standing up, and the time of trouble such as never was. Now we are going to qualify these things based on light that we have received from Sister White. Cool? Okay? Now, Revelation chapter 15 and verse 1 onward is connected to Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. Remember what we said earlier, that Daniel and Revelation, they are one book. So Daniel 12 and verse 1 and Revelation chapter 15 onwards, that these were the 7 last plagues, they go together. Cannot be separated. They go together. Right? So Revelation 15 verse 1, and you will see, in a while. And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled with the wrath of God. But what is the connection between Revelation chapter 15 to 16 and Daniel 12 and verse 1? We go to the spirit of prophecy. As normal, we go to the spirit of prophecy and see what light the servant of the Lord can shed on it. She says, it is impossible for the plagues to be poured out while Christ is officiated in the sanctuary. But as soon as his work is finished and his intercession closes, there's nothing to stay the wrath of God. Let's continue. She says, Michael had not stood up. So we know that she's speaking directly. Daniel 12 and verse 1. Right? And she said, and the time of trouble, remember Daniel 12 and verse 1? The words, the time of trouble such as never was, had not yet commenced. So she's referring to a time before the end of man's probation. Because Michael had not stood up. But it says, when our high priest, that who is Michael, Jesus Christ the righteous, the Son of God, the Son of Man, when he has finished his work in the sanctuary, he will stand up, put on his garments of vengeance, and then the 7 last plagues will be poured out. Then the 7 last plagues. So Michael, our high priest, is Jesus Christ himself. And I doubt anyone will question that, right? So Michael, him standing up, has to do with the close of man's probation. And the time of trouble or the wrath of God comes, or in the form of the 7 last plagues, they come after he's standing up, right? So it is not because of the 7 last plagues or of the time of trouble, because going up, that was how I understood it. But now I think I have a better understanding of what the Bible is saying, right? I think I have a better understanding now that the time of trouble is not the reason why Michael will stand. It is Michael standing that is going to trigger the time of trouble. Because the time of trouble is the 7 last plagues. The time of trouble is not is not the persecution of God's people. Even though it will be trouble for them, but the time of trouble is symbolically, meaning that it is symbolically linking to the 7 last plagues or the wrath of God that will be poured out upon the wicked for those people who have rejected salvation and have received the mark of the beast. All right? And we'll see probably some more. Now, in Hebrews, tells us that Christ is the high priest. So when she made a reference here that when our high priest and Michael being our high priest, Hebrews tells us straight up that seeing then that we have a great high priest, Michael the archangel, Jesus Christ, Emmanuel, that is passed into the heavens. Jesus, the Son of God, the Son of Man. Let us, my brothers and sisters, let us hold fast to our profession. Let us hold fast that Michael, the archangel, is Jesus Christ, our high priest. One who is human, one who suffered like us, is before his Father today, interceding on our behalf. So, we see that Michael is indeed Jesus Christ himself, and Sister White is only shedding more light on what the Bible says. And for my presentation, as much as I can, I go to the Bible first for it. For me, and my understanding of the purpose of Ellen White is different for someone who struggles with her ministry, who struggles knowing that her ministry is authoritative. So I can go to the spirit of prophecy, and anything I read, and I accept it as light. Anything I read in the spirit of prophecy, anything. But I know for others, who haven't yet seen her importance and her relevance to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, it's going to take a while for them to have that kind of understanding. So for persons like those, I like to go to the Bible first, and then I go to the spirit of prophecy where possible. All right? So, and remember, that was established in lesson 1 when we look at foundation laid. And in foundation laid, we said that the greater light, the Bible, and the lesser light, that's what God has provided for us. Right? The greater light, the sun, the lesser light, the moon. In the darkest hour of any 24-hour period, it is the moon that shines the light of the sun. Now, the light that the moon shines does not originate in the moon. It originated in the sun. But at night, we do not see the sun. It is the moon that reflects. And for those of us, in my age group who grew up in Mount Airy in Jamaica, Mount Airy, Mount Prospect, and we have to walk from Golden Spring in the nights without street lights, we know how relevant the moonlight is. And we don't say the sun is shining in the night. We say the moon is shining. But we know that the light that the moon is shining does not belong to it. It is the light of the sun that it is reflecting. All right? So, likewise, we are now living in the darkest hour of Earth's history. And in the darkest hour of Earth's history, God has given us the moon in the form of Ellen G. White to lead us to the dawn of the sun. What do you say? Amen. All right, thank you. So let's move on. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, because I know that there's some people who are not so receptive of Sister White, but I had to get that out of the way, all right? So we move on. Michael is our high priest, and we're looking back at Daniel 12, right? So Michael is our high priest. Him standing up means that probation has come to an end. Not that he's coming back, yes, the deliverance process is about to start. or it has started from even from the beginning of investigative judgment. The deliverance process has started. But it is almost heading to the final stage now. But he's not coming back yet. So he's getting ready to come now to deliver his people from the sinful world. And finally, we saw that the time of trouble, such as never was before time, is actually referring to the seven last plagues are the wrath of God. And it should be noted that it is when Michael, as I said, it is when Michael stands up that the seven last plagues or the time of trouble will commence. So it's not like there was a time of trouble and then Michael stood up. Michael stood up, and then by Michael standing up, it triggered the time of trouble. And that is something that I didn't know, as growing up in the Adventist church. I always thought that, it was because of a time of trouble that Michael stood up. Because I thought back then that the time of trouble was referring to the persecution or the time of trouble that the redeemed or those who rejected the mark of who will reject the mark of the beast, will be going through. But the time of trouble here is symbolically referring to the seven last plagues or the wrath of God, which will only be poured out upon those who reject salvation and are alive. Right? So, and in verse 2 it says, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. So remember, we're studying Daniel and Revelation, right? So we go back to Daniel 12 and verse 2 now. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Now, so does this resurrection, so we are talking about a resurrection here, and there's no doubt about it, and we know it's using symbols, which we'll look at in a minute or two, right? But it is indeed speaking of a resurrection, and I will show you, prove that to that, all right? So does this resurrection speak of the two resurrections that we know of? Is it speaking of any of those two resurrections? One we know of, that all the righteous who are in the grave at that time are going to be raised. That's resurrection 1. And resurrection 2, where all the wicked who are dead in the grave, who are dead, will be raised. But remember that this prophecy series was written, right, some time ago. So even though it was written for some time, that doesn't mean that I'm saying that everything that I'm talking about is a thing, and that there's nothing else that is left to be revealed. There's never a point in our life, Sister White said, that we reach where we find that we do not, that we feel that we do not need to know no truth, all right? Because God is infinite. And because God is infinite and God exists out of time, He exists outside of time, He exists outside of everything, then in order for us to know Him, we will have to continue to infinitely learn about Him. Which and infinitely learn to know about Him means that we will never stop learning about Him. That's what it means, all right? So it's not like at the end of eternity, we'll say, okay, yes, we know everything about God. He's infinite, so we'll infinitely continue to know about Him. So I know that there are some people who refer to this text here as in reference to the second resurrection. And I was reading a prophecy series, Daniel, and the author did make reference to this resurrection as reference to the first resurrection and Michael's deliverance. But we'll show from the Bible that, it is not speaking of the first resurrection. We'll look at it, right? And it's not that, he was wrong. It's just that he was working with the light that he had. Just like in 1844, where the believers had light that something was going to happen on the 22nd of October, 1844. The calculation was correct, but their conclusion was wrong, right? So, is it referring to the first resurrection? Or is it referring to another resurrection before Jesus Christ comes? And bear in mind that Daniel 12, 1 and 2 is referring to a period before, shortly before. And when I say shortly, I'm not giving a time, a time period. The shortly here could be whatever time. But I'm going to say it's a shortly before Jesus Christ comes. A period of time just at the closing of probation and before he comes. All right? Now, the Bible says many of them. If you notice, it did not say all. So we know that it cannot be the resurrections, the general resurrections, because it said many of them. Many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth. Many. Look at the definition for the word many. The dictionary says that many means a large number of something, whilst all refers to the whole quantity, everything. So many of them could not be all. So if many of them who are dead in the grave are resurrected, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt, then we cannot say that the some who got everlasting life and the some to shame equates to many, to all. So, for example, it's like we're saying that we're in a church, and and the pastor says, okay, we're going to send some students to camp, right? And we're going to send many of the students to camp. Not all, but many of them are going to camp. Some will go this week, and some will go that week. So we're going to send those who are between the age of 13 and 15, right? So some will go this week, and some will go the other. But there are other children in the church, but they are not the ones who are going, or those who are classified in the many. So many is not all. And if you take some of the many and then another some of the many and you put them back together, they cannot equal to all. So it's like if you're saying that 80% or 90% of something, and then you divide it among two people, the portion that they have cannot be equal to all. So the Bible is saying that many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life and some to everlasting contempt. Right? Well, what it says, sleep in the dust of the earth? What is it talking about? In 2 Corinthians 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 51, the Bible says that what? We shall not all sleep. Referring to sleep here being symbolic to death. And if you remember the story of Lazarus, Jesus is using the same words that we are seeing in this. Sleep. Lazarus is sleeping. Let me go and wake him from the sleep. The disciples thought that Lazarus was literally sleeping. So they said, and knowing that sleeping was probably one of the best remedy, for Lazarus' sickness, they said that, that if he sleeps, let him remain, and get some rest. But Jesus was not talking about that type of sleep. So Jesus told him that Lazarus is dead. So sleep in the dust of the earth is referring to people who are dead and buried. And likewise, when he mentioned awake, he said that Lazarus shall, let us go and awake him. So many of those who are in the grave will be resurrected. Not all, but many of them. Right? Some of the many will receive everlasting life. And some of the many, shame and everlasting contempt. Now, these two some cannot equal to all of the dead, because only many of the dead were raised in the first place. All right? So some people who would probably think that, okay, this is speaking of, of all the dead. No, it could not be speaking of all the dead, because the Bible is clear, it is specific, where it says that only many of them. So the sum is of the many, and the next sum is of the many. And if it's not all in the first place, then many plus many cannot equal to 100%. Many plus many just equals back to, sum plus sum just equals back to the many that was resurrected. So in this verse, it is clear that the Bible is indeed speaking of a resurrection. Sleep, dead, right? Awake, resurrection. But this is the only resurrection where some or many of both the righteous and the wicked dead are raised. No, they are raised at the same time. We do not see that in any of the other two resurrections, because the first one does not happen like that. The second one does not happen like that. And not only, but some, the righteous, receiving eternal life, and some of the wicked. And looking carefully here, because it does not say that the wicked are receiving eternal death. They are only being raised to be shame and disgrace. That's all they're getting up for. Everlasting contempt and to be shamed. That is what they're being raised for. So if it was only the second resurrection, then they will be getting up to receive eternal death. But we see a class here being raised that will be receiving eternal life. So this differs from the first resurrection in all form, and also the second resurrection. This will not happen in the first resurrection, because we know that in the first resurrection only eternal life will be given, and only one class of people will be raised. Likewise, in the second resurrection, only one class, and none will be receiving shame and everlasting contempt. Eternal death will be the penalty for everyone who receives the reward for the second resurrection. Quick recap. We saw that the resurrection one takes place at the second advent of Christ. Only one class of people. It is exclusive only to the righteous. And there's only one reward given. Only one reward is given for this resurrection. And that reward is eternal life. Quickly look at resurrection 2. It happens 1,000 years after the first one. One class of people. It is exclusive only the ungodly. So no one will be getting everlasting life. No second chances around here. And only one reward, eternal death. No one who is raised in the second resurrection will be receiving eternal shame shame and everlasting contempt. No one. So the Bible is not speaking of a resurrection that is in relation to the first or the second resurrection. So this resurrection in Daniel 2:12 is the only resurrection. It is the only resurrection mentioned in the Bible where two classes of dead are raised at the same time. The only one. And not all of that class is being raised. Only some righteous and only some wicked. In the first resurrection, all the righteous dead will be raised. In the second resurrection, all the unrighteous dead will be raised. All right? We continue. In Revelation chapter 14, verse 12 to 13, the Bible says, "Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus Christ." So, we know that those who pierced him will represent those who are, the wicked will be raised in that resurrection. So we are now going to qualify who are the some that will be raised to receive eternal life. Who are the some, right? That will be raised before Christ comes. Who are the some righteous? The some, who are those righteous? So we start by looking at Revelation chapter 14. It says here, the patience of the saints. Here are they that keeps the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. And verse 13 says, "Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth." Now it's important for us to know what point in time this statement was made and the purpose of this statement. And we might not have time to speak about that in this presentation. We could look at it further. But this statement was made in regards to the Adventists back in 1844. After they started keeping all of the commandments of God. Remember William Miller, he studied Daniel prophecy. They incorrectly calculated, they correctly calculated the date to be October 22nd, 1844. But they came to the wrong conclusion that Christ was going to die. Christ was going to come onto the earth and redeem those, destroy sinners. But Christ did not come back on the 22nd of October, 1844. They were disappointed. Some went back and they studied the scripture and they started finding more truth. The Sabbath is one, and they realized exactly what happened on the 22nd of October, 1844. When the light came to them of the third angel's message in relation to Sabbath keeping, they accepted it. And at that time, the angel says, "Here is the patience of the saints." So the saints are the Adventists in 1844 who started to keep the 7-day Sabbath. And then the Bible says, "Blessed are the dead," in relation to the same group of people. It says, "Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. Yea, the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors. Yes, said the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them." Sister White says, the book Great Controversy, she says, "Graves are open, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt." And we know that she is quoting directly from Daniel 12 and verse 2. Right? She continues. She says, "All who have died in the faith of the third angel's message come forth from the tomb, glorified, to hear the covenant of peace with those who have kept his law." So my brothers and sisters, there is indeed a special resurrection. There is a special resurrection. She says, all who have died in faith of the third angel's message. And this is a time period. Because Adam did not die under the third angel's message. David did not die under the third angel's message. The apostles did not die under the third angel's message. Paul did not die under the third angel's message. You see what I'm saying? The third angel's message is the key here. Those who have died faithfully under the third angel's message will be raised in the resurrection mentioned in Daniel 12 and verse 2. So you must have died under, and we're going to qualify the third angel's message some more by looking back at Revelation chapter 14 and verse 13. So let's bear with me, right? And as I said, I know this might be a long presentation, but just bear with me. I'm going through as quickly as possible. So notice here she says all. So we're not running from words. Even though Daniel says many shall and some righteous, but the some righteous is referring to all of the righteous dead who have died since 1844 under the third angel's message. But there's more to it. There's more to it to know. Not only all the righteous dead, but it's referring to that is something that we can be used, as a marker to continue. In the book The Story of Redemption, page 409, paragraph 1, she says, the graves were open. Again, we know that she's quoting from where? Daniel chapter 12 and verse 2. And said, those who have died faithfully under the third angel's message, keeping the Sabbath. So we know that she's not generally speaking of every righteous people who have died since the third angel's message, who have died faithfully. You must be a Sabbath keeper. You must die faithfully under the third angel's message. And we're going to clarify if the Bible tells us exactly when it is talking about, right? So the graves were open, and those who had died faithfully in faith, and faithfully is the same thing, right? So I'm not, trying to confuse anyone, but it is the same thing. So those who had died faithfully under the third angel's message, keeping the 7th-day Sabbath, they shall be resurrected, glorified, to hear the covenant of peace that God was to make with those who kept his law, or those who did not accept the mark of the beast. All, she says in the great controversy. But now in the Story of Redemption, he's saying those. It is the same thing. If you put them in context, the all is talking to all those who have died faithfully under the third angel's message, keeping the Sabbath, keeping the 7th-day Sabbath. My brothers and sisters, the Sabbath is important. It is important to God. And that is why as Seventh-day Adventists, we must tell our friends, our neighbors, we must tell everyone of the wonderful gift that God will give to those who keep his commandment. We're not saying that the commandments will save us. We know that we are saved by grace. We know that. But our faith, it is our works that tells us where our faith is, isn't it? So because we are saved, we keep his commandments. Not because we keep the commandments while we are saved, but the Sabbath is important. No righteous who died since 1844, who died since the third angel's message has been preached, will be raised in this resurrection if you did not die a Sabbath keeper. If you died faithfully and you are not a Sabbath keeper, you didn't know about the Sabbath, you will be in the first resurrection. This resurrection, as it relates to the righteous, is exclusively for those who died faithfully under the third angel's message, keeping the 7th-day Sabbath. Continue. And some to everlasting shame and contempt. So we know that some will be raised to everlasting life. And we address that as those believers who have died under the third angel's message, keeping the 7th-day Sabbath. Those who have died faithfully, that is. So that is why I will say that no Seventh-day Adventist who died faithfully can be in the first resurrection. And you know why I say that? Let me go back and look at this text. Look at this quote. It says, all who have died faithfully. So no Seventh-day Adventists who have died. So when you go to a Seventh-day Adventist funeral and you hear the pastor saying, committing the body and looking forward to the first resurrection, you can tell him, no, pastor. No. We have further light that says that no Seventh-day Adventist will be in the first resurrection. It's either the special resurrection or the second one. If we do not see our loved ones getting up in the special resurrection, we will know that they have been lost. We will know. Right? So, Revelation 1 and verse 7 again tells us that those who pierce Christ are going to see him coming. So we know that they will have to be raised before he comes. Right? No. So we're going to go back to Matthew now, Matthew 26. And we're going to look at a very interesting encounter between Christ and Caiaphas. And we should never take this for granted. Now, Jesus was before the Sanhedrin, and people came and gave false testimony against him. And then, Caiaphas boastfully asked him, I command you to tell me whether you're the son of God, or something along that line. So Matthew said, Jesus said unto him, thou hast said it. You said that I'm the Son of God. Nevertheless, I say unto you that hereafter shall you, Caiaphas, you members of the Sanhedrin, hereafter shall you see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, coming in the clouds of heaven. Now, Jesus knew that Caiaphas would be lost. But here he's saying that Caiaphas, you are going to see me when I'm coming back the second time. Where's Caiaphas now? He's dead. But Jesus is telling him, because he is going to be among those wicked who will be in that resurrection of Daniel 12 and verse 2. Let's look at another text. What Jesus was talking about. Jesus says in Matthew 25:31, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels, the clouds, right? So the clouds here is referring to all the holy angels. Then shall you see him sitting upon the throne of his glory. So Jesus was referring to his second coming, and he was telling Caiaphas, who would be lost, that he is going to see him when he comes the second time. We continue. It says, they also which pierced him. Revelation 1 and verse 7. So that goes with Daniel 12 and verse 2, the last part. It says, those who mocked and derided Christ die in agonies, and the most violent opposers of his truth and his people are raised, to behold him in his glory and see the honor placed upon his loyal and obedient. There are those who mock Christ in his humiliation. With thrilling power come to their mind the sufferer's words. When adjured by the high priest, he solemnly declared, hereafter you shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Matthew 26 verse 64 that we look at. Now they behold him in his glory, and they are yet to see him sitting, at the right hand of power. Those who are derided his claim to be the Son of God are now speechless. There is the haughty Herod. So my brothers and sisters, even Herod is going to be present and alive when Christ comes the second time. And we know that Herod cannot be, because remember that Herod, was eaten by worms, because I think they were started to worship him as a god, and he became crazy to believing that, he's God, and worms ate him. So we know that Herod, is lost. Is no if or but. The Bible tells us that we shall know. We are not judging any man and determining any man's destiny. But we know Herod, was lost. And Sister White is saying that there is the haughty Herod who jeered at his royal title and bade him mocking the soldiers, crown him king. We continue. They are the very men with impious hands placed upon his form the purple robe, upon his sacred brow, and the thorny crown. All those people are going to be raised. And in unresisting hand, the mimic sector, and bowed before him in blasphemous mockery, they are going to be raised too. The men who smote and spit upon the Prince of Life now turn from the piercing gaze and seek to flee with the overpowering glory of his presence. Those who drove the nails in his hands, they will be raised. The soldiers who pierced his side, they will be raised. He will be raised to behold the mark with terror and remorse. At his trial, Caiaphas raised his right hand towards heaven, addressing Jesus in the form of a solemn oath. I adjure thee by the living God, he said, that you tell me whether thou be the Son of God, be Christ, the Son of God. Every ear was bent to listen, and every eye was fixed on his face as he answered, you, Caiaphas, had said it. But nevertheless, I say unto you, hereafter you shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Sister White says, continue in the book Maranatha, page 282, she says, when Christ comes the second time, they will see him as King of heaven. When Christ comes back the second time, those who pierced him, and those who pierced him, as we saw, includes those who pierced him, includes those who mocked and derided his dying agonies, and also his violent opposers of his truth and his people. So not only those who were present at the time he was killed are going to see him, but throughout history, I believe that we might see Pharaoh and some of these Roman empires, who killed millions of God's people. These violent opposers of his people and his church, they are going to be raised to see Christ when he's coming back the second time. So does the Bible speak of a special resurrection? Yes, it does. It does speak of a resurrection that's going to happen just sometime before Christ comes. Right? When? The Bible also tells us exactly when it is going to happen too. Right? So we'll get there. Here is a picture of the saints. We're looking now at the blessed dead. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. And in verse 13, it says, blessed are the dead that die in the Lord from henceforth. Now, what does the word henceforth means here? Is it arbitrarily being used? I don't think so. You see, my brothers and sisters, God we serve is a specific God. And when he uses certain words, it is important for us to study, search, investigate, and probe. Right? So henceforth actually means a literal point in time which can either be from this time onward or from that time onward. From this time onward or from that time onward. So, the Bible is saying that blessed, remember Sister White says that all who died faithfully under the third angel's message, keeping the Sabbath. And we know that Revelation chapter 14, the third angel's message has to do with Sabbath keeping, because the light of the third angel's message was in Sabbath keeping. The first message, light, purpose was to divide the church. The second angel's message was to call them from the church. The third message was to reveal a light about the true Sabbath. And here the Bible is saying that blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from this time onward, because that's what henceforth means, from this point in time onward. So henceforth is a point in time in history. So we want to see if the Bible sheds any light on which time or when is this time, because in henceforth henceforth the reward is from this time onward. So whatever comes before cannot be beneficial of the henceforth, because henceforth means from this time or from that time onward. So blessed are they that die faithfully from this time onward. There's a blessing for them. So those who died henceforth, or from this time onward, their death is a blessing. Right? And the blessing has something to do with keeping all of the commandments, including the fourth commandment, because this is attached to the third angel's message. And as Seventh-day Adventists, we should take time to know this too. Knowing the three angels' messages verbatim is good, but we should also try to know their purposes, when were they fulfilled. What was it that was done in 1844 that led to the fulfillment of the first angel's message, the second message, the third message, and what will be done that will bring forth the fulfillment of the fourth angel's message. What was the midnight cry? We should know that. Because for me, especially when I hear Seventh-day Adventists singing songs like "At the Midnight Cry, We'll Be Going Home," and I'm saying no. You know that they are yet to understand what happened in 1844. Because if we have a full understanding of the second angel's message, we would know that at the midnight cry, no one went home. The midnight cry was pointing to the beginning or the commencement of the investigative judgment in 1844. Now, so when is henceforth? Again, we do some reading. Sister White says, as we trace the history of the beginning of Sabbath keeping, because henceforth has everything to do with keeping the seventh-day Sabbath. And that is why she said in the story of redemption that those who died faithfully keeping the Sabbath will be raised. Those who died from henceforth. So we're going to qualify henceforth now. She says, as we trace the history of Sabbath keeping among the early believers, we go to a little church in the township of Washington in the heart of New Hampshire, where the members of an independent Christian church in 1843 heard and accepted the message. One in their midst, Rachel Oakes, she started putting forth the binding claim of the fourth commandment. And in 1844, some saw it and they accepted it. And that is why the Bible says in Revelation chapter 14 and verse 12, here are the patience of the saints. Here are they that keeps the commandment. Here are they that are keeping all the commandments. So if you are a Christian tonight, and you're not a Seventh-day, you're not keeping the Sabbath, now that you know that the Sabbath must be kept, in order for you to be a saint, you know that you have to keep the 7 days Sabbath, right? We continue. Some in 1844 accepted the Sabbath. So we are seeing a beginning of the Sabbath observance among the Adventists. They were not Seventh-day Adventists, they were just Adventists. The name Adventist came in 1860. And in 1863, we were organized under the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. So here's a picture of Rachel Oakes Preston. And we should know Rachel Oakes Preston is like the lady who didn't want to sit at the back of the bus. What's her name again? I don't remember her name, but that black woman who led the civil rights movement here in America. I don't remember her name. Her name is Black, being Black from remembrance. But that lady who didn't sit at the back of the bus, if we know about her, as Seventh-day Adventists, we should know Rachel Oakes Preston. If we know about Marcus Garvey and all, Martin Luther King Jr., if we know about these people, we should take time out to know who was Rachel Oakes Preston, the woman who set forth the binding claim. It was Ellen G. White. It wasn't Ellen G. White, because Ellen White got this light probably almost 2 years after. I think it was in 1846 that she got the light of the Sabbath. It took her a while to get it. So one of their member, a man called Williams Farnsworth, in a Sunday morning service, so she believed, but they were still going to church on Sunday. He stood in the church and declared, hey, I am going to keep the Sabbath of the fourth commandment. I want to be a saint. Now, they weren't saying that literally, right? But they were fulfilling the third angel's message. A dozen or so joined him in taking their stands on keeping all of God's commandments, including the 7th-day Sabbath. They were the first Seventh-day Adventists. And here we see a picture of um, William Farnsworth. He was the man who stood to his feet in 1844 and says, I am going to keep the Sabbath as the Bible says. And then others followed him. And as a result, we hold dearly to that truth today. So we thank God for these people, for using these people. Here we see Frederick Wheeler. He was the first ordained Seventh-day Adventist pastor because he was the pastor. Not Seventh-day Adventist, but he was the first Sabbath-keeping or Adventist pastor. You know, Seventh-day, even though he didn't have the name, but, you know, he was the first Seventh-day. He was the first pastor of a group that kept the 7-day Sabbath then, right? Just to say it like that. Because they were not, you know, yet 7-day. They were still Adventists, but then they hadn't adopted the name until sometime after. Then, you know, we see another man who, you know, who was also instrumental. Then he did some work, which this man, Joseph Bates, saw. And then Joseph Bates did some, you know, some extensive research, wrote many articles. One of those articles, you know, came to this lovely couple here that is called James and Ellen White, and they accepted the light of the Sabbath keeping, which have been like almost 2 years or thereabout after the others were keeping it. So when people even say, you know, we're keeping the Sabbath because of Ellen G. White, you know that they do not know the history of our church. They do not know the history of the church, right? Ellen White accepted the Sabbath through the ministry of Joseph White. She was receiving dreams, but, you know, visions, but as it relates to the Sabbath, she had to accept the Sabbath from reading the Bible herself. And then God, you know, gave her a vision to say, yes, you know, you guys are on the right path. So those who had accepted the light of the Sabbath concerning the mediation and concerning the mediation of Christ and the perpetuity of his law, of the law of God, found that these truths were brought to view in the third angel's message, right? So Sabbath keeping was brought to view in the third message. And that is why the Bible says, here are the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. She says in the story of redemption, she says, since 1844, in the fulfillment of the prophecy of the third angel's message, the attention of the world has been brought to the true Sabbath, and constantly increasing number are returning to the observance of God's holy day. So, my brothers and sisters, henceforth is a time marker, but henceforth is 1844, or when the brethren started to keep the 7-day Sabbath. So everyone was died henceforth, everyone was died faithfully since 1844, keeping the 7-day Sabbath, will be raised in the special resurrection. They are the blessed dead. Everyone, all, she says, who have died faithfully. All, not some. So that is why I'm saying that I believe that no Seventh-day Adventist can be in the first resurrection. It is a special resurrection or you are lost. Because all. But what about those people, you know, who died since, but they, you know, they didn't know about the Sabbath? They will be in the first resurrection. Or we know because it says all who have been faithfully keeping the Sabbath. So if you didn't die as a Sabbath keeper, but you died faithfully, then you will be in the first resurrection. But if we see someone, a member of our church or a loved one, and we're looking forward to see them, and that day they are not raised in the special resurrection, we know that they are lost. We know that they are lost. Now, as I said, this presentation is a bit lengthy, so we have to take a break now and continue next week. I think I had to go that route so I could bring as much information as possible to the brethren. What will we look at next week? We will look at when will a special resurrection takes place, because we know that the first one happens after Christ comes. We know that the second one happens 1,000 years after. So we're going to see if the Bible and from the spirit of prophecy we can find out exactly when it's going to happen. Not exactly when, not meaning the date and the time, but exactly when, from our understanding is that we have an idea of when it's going to happen. We'll also look at who will cause this resurrection. We know that Jesus causes the first and he causes the second resurrection. Who will raise those in the special resurrection? We're going to look at that next week, so please be here. We'll also be looking at the rewards, because we know that in resurrection 1 only one reward is given, and in resurrection 2 only one reward is given. But in Daniel 12 and verse 2 it spoke of 2 rewards: everlasting life and shame and everlasting contempt. So we're going to look at the rewards that will be given. Now, if you have any question in relation to this presentation or anything that you would want us to look at, I invite you to just send us an email to the Advent Band Ministry at gmail.com, or you can comment on the video below, or you can share it too. Yes, I'm encouraging you to share it. And I want to thank those of you who are for your kind words, because there are people who are looking forward to the weekly presentation, and that says a lot. I really appreciate that. Thank you, for those and for your encouraging words. And so if you want to ask a question or make a comment, there are many ways. You can reach us on Twitter at the Advent Band MI, Advent Band MI, or the Advent Band Ministry on YouTube. Our email address is on the screen, the Advent Band Ministry at gmail.com. And if there was something that was said, especially in this presentation, that you're not clear on, we'll try to look at it before next week's presentation, and then we will go into lesson 5.2. Now our key text will remain the same. Now we have come to the end of tonight's presentation, and I'm making an appeal, and the appeal is along this line. You have a desire to follow God. It is your desire. But before tonight, you did not realize how important the Sabbath is to Jesus. Even if you're a Seventh-day Adventist. But you did not realize how important Sabbath keeping is to God's remnant. And you're saying to God, we know that the Sabbath cannot save us. We're not talking as if the Sabbath can save us. We know that. We're saved by grace through faith. And you're saying to God tonight that I want to be in your kingdom when you come. I do not want to receive the mark of the beast. I want to receive the seal of God, which will only be given to those who accept the seventh-day Sabbath. All the commandments of God. And you're saying that, God, if I die, God forbid it, but if I die I want to be in this special resurrection. Because as a member, as someone who has been baptized in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I only have two options: the special resurrection and the second resurrection. But I want to, be with you, Jesus. And I know that if I do not keep all your commandments, I will not see your face. So if it is a desire to receive power and strength from God in observing not only the 9 of his commandments, not 7, but all, having to deal with the 4th and the 7th and all the others, if it is a desire, I'm inviting you to surrender all to Jesus tonight. Because he's saying to you, if you give me your heart, I'll give you my Father's kingdom. Anyone who has been convicted of the 3 angels' messages either is going to be among those who will be in the second resurrection if you die, or in the first special resurrection. No, in the special resurrection if you die, or the second resurrection, or if you remain alive, you will be among those with the seal of God, or among those who have the mark of the beast. The Sabbath does not save you. It is Jesus who saves us. But because he saves us, we have seen that the Sabbath is so important to him. So important that after the believers in 1844 saw the light of the Sabbath, he covenanted with them, with himself, to bless them with a special resurrection. We know that resurrection is referring to, dead, because you have to die. But we will not all sleep. Some of us will be translated from this earth to never seeing death. But a time is coming, Jesus says, the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipper must worship God in spirit and in truth, because the Father requires such to worship him. I beg you to surrender all to Jesus. Say, all to Jesus I surrender. This is my prayer in Jesus' name. Thank you. May God bless you. Have a great week. See you next Sabbath.